So we're going to bring in Scott Miller. He's sitting on the Menard Studio hotline to talk some Major League Baseball. Scott, thanks for the time. I know there's quite a bit to get to. And let's start with the All-Star game and those rosters. In your opinion, well, let me just put it this way. What's your take on the A-Rod situation and him not making that roster based on his stats this season?
I don't have a problem with it. You look at his stats, he probably deserves to be there. There's no question, at least as a reserve. Although, as a designated hitter, Nelson Cruz and Prince Fielder both have better stats than he does. So, from that perspective, you could make a case that, that Cruz and Prince are in line ahead of him, and how many DHs do you need? So, I don't think it's outrage that he's not there for that reason. Now, is he one of the game's biggest stars, one of the biggest names in the game? Should those guys be at the game? You can certainly argue yes. But, then again, you throw all the PED stuff into the mix. And, I'll tell you what, it's a privilege to go to the All-Star game. It's not a player's right. And given the last 2 or 3 years, when A-Rod tried to burn down every possible path that people are trying to get to prove he took steroids, from threatening to sue baseball to even threatening to sue his own players' union. Based on all that behavior, I don't blame baseball for not inviting him.
How do you think he's handled this season so far in regards to what he was coming off the suspension? I mean, it seems to me because he's playing well, I don't know what the reaction to him has been outside of Yankee Stadium. I know if you go to Boston, they're going to boo him because he's in a Yankees uniform, regardless of what his name is. But, I mean, all in all, it feels like he's been very humbled by this whole experience.
It does. You know what? I will give him credit. I've been one of his biggest critics for a number of years, and he does appear humbled. He does appear in the mode of keep his mouth shut and try to do the right thing. He's not drawing attention to himself. I do think in terms of rehabilitating his image, I don't know that it's ever going to be rehabilitated. I know it won't completely go back to the image he had way back, but he has, I think, gone the extra mile to make amends and try to keep clean and keep on the straight and narrow. And from that degree, he's also stayed healthy, which I have to admit I'm surprised. I thought my take going into the spring training was that he'd start spring training. And a guy closing in on 40 years old who has been away from the game for a year and a half would somehow get injured. I just thought he'd be a walking health hazard this year. But he's to his credit, he's been able to stay healthy.
Well, he's not the only name that was overlooked in some people's opinions for the All-Star game. Who is we've still got the fan vote to come, so we've got one more player from each league coming in, but. Who is the biggest snub, do you think, in your opinion, on both sides, the AL and the NL?
Well, I'll give you a couple. I mean, American League, the guy who did make the team, but I think it's too bad he's not starting. I think he was snubbed from the starting lineup, and that is Jason Kipnis of the Cleveland Indians. That guy is having a marvelous season. And, hey, Jose Altuve he's a good player. Great player, but I think in this instance, Jason Kipnis this year deserves to be ahead of him. Brian Dozier of the Minnesota Twins also is having a very, very good year. Now he was snubbed from the team. I think is he one of the 5 men, last man in vote. So Dozier certainly has a case to be made. I think as a snub, and in the National League, to me. Clayton Kershaw, I can't believe he wasn't on the team. Now, I know he's not having a Cy Young year so far this year. I know he's struggled a little bit, but his numbers overall are still pretty good. He leads the major leagues in strikeouts, and he's coming off a year in which he not only won the National League Cy Young Award, but the MVP award. And based off of that, I can't believe they didn't put Clayton Kershaw on the team.
Fort O'Brien, ESPN Evansville, 105.3 online, ESPNEvansville.com. Scott Miller, MLB national columnist from Bleacher Report, joining us on the Menard Studio hotline. So, Scott, when you look at this first half of the season, and I think we spoke to you a month or so back about some baseball stuff. You look at these teams and where everybody is standing right now. Which team has been the biggest surprise for you here in the first half?
Well, I think you have to start with the Houston Astros. I think given, people knew they had good young talent, but here we are a couple days away from the All-Star break, and the fact that they're in first place still, that's impressive. The Angels have certainly closed the gap on them, so we'll see how this plays out. But the fact that Houston's led pretty much the entire first half, I think that's hugely impressive. Yeah, I think I'll throw St. Louis in that category too. Not because we didn't expect good things from St. Louis, but here's a team whose top prospect, Oscar Taveras, who they made room for last July by trading away Alan Craig and some others. Taveras was killed in an auto accident in October, so they had to hurry up and figure out a way to replace him out in right field, which they did by acquiring Jason Hayward. And then to start the season, have Adam Wainwright go down for the season, like the first week of the year, then to lose first baseman Matt Adams for pretty much the season as well, and now Matt Holliday's out with a quad injury. For the Cardinals to still maintain not only first place but the best record in baseball, I think I just marvel at that organization and what they've been able to do. Minnesota Twins, nice turnaround too. I mean, if season ended today, they would be a wild card team. Paul Molitor, early candidate for manager of the year in the American League. Probably at this point, A.J. Hinch of Houston's got that sewn up, but Molitor's got to get his props too.
What about some of these teams, like when the season started and you're doing your research and you're doing your homework and you're looking at these rosters and thinking, okay, this team's got the potential to do something this season. Which one of those teams on your list that you thought was going to do something and have fallen flat has been the most surprising to you?
You know what? I appreciate that question. That's like a meatball down the middle. I can answer that in half a second.
Good.
The Seattle Mariners. I was on their bandwagon to the point where I was one of the guys picking them as a team that would represent the American League in the World Series this year. I thought once they signed Nelson Cruz and added him to Robinson Cano, I liked their young pitchers behind Felix Hernandez, among others, Taijuan Walker. I thought was going to have a breakout year. He's been pitching better in the last month, but the first 6 weeks of the season, he was absolutely dreadful. And, here we are closing in on the All-Star break, and the Mariners are still 7 games under 500. They're 9 games out, and it looks like, the season's going to end way prematurely for them.
Well, this I don't know if this will be another meatball down the middle, but, we'll try to make it as easy on you as we can. Reaching the mid part of the season, a lot of people want to throw out the awards. That's what you do. Mid-season winners, Rookie of the Year in NL, AL, and who would you have as your MVP right now?
Rookie of the Year in the National League. I'd have Jock Peterson, center fielder of the Dodgers, just by a hair over Chris Bryant of the Cubs. Chris has done everything people thought he could do. He just got, he gave Jock Peterson a head start. Peterson was the Dodgers' opening day center fielder, and Chris Bryant came up mid-April. So that's what I would say. Peterson over Bryant. American League Rookie of the Year. I'm drawing a blank.
Good, because I did too.
I mean, where it's at is in the National League. I mean, the guy that could win it, even though he didn't come up until a few weeks ago, Carlos Correa, the shortstop of the Houston Astros.
Mm-hmm.
That guy, he's legit. A.J. Hinch in spring training. Houston's manager, I talked to him, I saw him in Lakeland, Florida when they were playing the Tigers one day. And A.J. Hinch said he compared Carlos Correa to A-Rod to me. He said largely because of the body type. He's 6'4", and rangy, tall, lean, and not to mention incredibly talented. So I think that's a pretty good comparison. I think Correa could end up winning it when all is said and done. The Sousa kid in Tampa Bay, the outfielder, he's a rookie. He's certainly in the running as well. MVPs. I think right now in the American League, for my money, Josh Donaldson of the Toronto Blue Jays. I mean, you're going to talk Mike Trout. He's always going to be in the conversation. But Josh Donaldson's been sensational, both offensively and defensively. The Blue Jays have scored more runs than any major league team. Josh Donaldson has been at the center of a lot of that. So, I like him. In the National League, the guy that we've talked so much about over the last couple of years is finally stayed off the disabled list, on the field, and is having a sensational year, and that's Bryce Harper. I think, for my money, the MVPs, Bryce Harper in the National League and Josh Donaldson in the American League, as we speak today.
Yeah, I think those are good ones to pick, and probably tough to argue. Scott Miller, MLB national columnist for Bleacher Report, our guest here on Ford and O'Brien, ESPN Evansville 105.3 online, ESPNEvansville.com. We got just a couple minutes here, Scott, but I wanted to talk some trade deadline because that'll be creeping up on us quickly after the All-Star break's all said and done. As I had mentioned there to start the interview, where we sit in Indiana is not too far away from Cincinnati. We've got a nice contingency of Reds fans here in this area. Where does Johnny Cueto end up? Does he stay a Red, or is he gone somewhere else come trade deadline?
Yeah, I think he's gone. I think Cueto will be traded. I think Mike Leake will be traded, and I think Aroldis Chapman very well might be. But Cueto, it's a guessing game at this point. I've talked to a lot of scouts and a lot of executives in the last 10 days or so, and it's a hard trade deadline to get a read on right now because there's so many teams that are in it still. Really, you look at who are sellers right now. The only teams you really point to that are completely out of it at this point are Philadelphia, Milwaukee, probably Oakland, although Oakland's, they've made a nice charge in the last month. But other than that, there's not many teams out of it, and so many teams are still in it. Where Cueto's concerned, Kansas City has been out prowling, scouting all kinds of starting pitchers. They've scouted Johnny Cueto quite a bit. They've scouted Mike Leake quite a bit. I think Kansas City is a possibility, and I think the Toronto Blue Jays are a possibility. The Jays, as I said a minute ago, they scored more runs than anybody in baseball. I think there's no question they've got to get a starting pitcher. They've got to get a relief pitcher, probably a closer. So the Jays are positioned to, depending on how much they want to give up, they could make some kind of blockbuster deal for Cueto and Aroldis Chapman. That might be the deal that puts the Jays over the top in the American League East.
Scott Miller, MLB national columnist for Bleacher Report. Scott, always good stuff. Great talking to you. We appreciate the time, and hopefully we can do it again soon as we get a little closer to playoff time.
My pleasure, guys. Thanks, and enjoy your summer and the All-Star game next week.
Will do. You as well. Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it.